Greetings and welcome to a special bonus episode of the Remarkable Retail Podcast recorded live at the NRF Big Show in New York City. Our special guest joining us in the Marketile podcasting studio is Roshan Jhunja, General Manager for Retail at Square. Launched in 2009 by Jack Dorsey and now supporting sellers from Australia to Ireland to Canada, Japan, and across all 50 U.S. states, Square has evolved from enabling anyone to take a payment anywhere. I've paid for more than a few cab rides over the years via their handy device attached to a mobile phone, to being a partner to sellers of all sizes, large enterprise-scale businesses with complex commerce operations. Let's listen in now.
Well, we are live from the floor at NRF, recording our first exciting interview here with Roshan from Square. Welcome.
Thank you, guys. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here as well. Can you just maybe start off by telling us a little bit about who you are, your personal journey, and then we'll kind of dive into what your current responsibilities are and go from there.
Yeah, so my name, again, is Roshan. I've been with Square for just over 6 years, and before this, my career was largely financial services, investment banking and hedge funds. Started career early as a software engineer and kind of went from there. And what I found was really more of an interest in working on products that directly connected with people, added value, as opposed to, financial services, sometimes a little bit more internal facing. And so that, and I've really valued design. And so what I started looking for, because I've long admired companies that are able to blend design and technology. I think they make some of the most compelling products out there as a consumer. And so when I went in search of that, Square was kind of, the top of the list. And I joined in days, just 2 months actually, before they ended up shipping the Square for Retail product for the first time to the market.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I was there for the start of that, and then here we are 6 years later, and still going strong.
Right now, I imagine most people that are listening have some familiarity with Square, but on the off chance that they don't, or maybe there's a richness there that people may not appreciate, just tell us a little bit more about Square, what makes Square special, how the growth has been developing, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and thanks for that opportunity, because I do believe that a lot of folks know Square, but they know us in that 13 years ago, in innovation that disrupted payments for the first time. It was the little white reader that plugged into an iPad and enabled you to take payments. So Square is much more than that today. So I would say that, obviously we started with payments, we moved into point of sale. In the cloud point of sale industry, of course, there's lots of folks in it now. But today, Square is a company that has myriad solutions. It's a whole ecosystem that spans restaurants, retail, services, businesses, and more, all built on a common platform. And there's something unique and magical about that platform approach, which we can get into if you like. But it's software, and it's hardware, and it's APIs. And so the reason that's important is because it's not just about what we can build, and we do spend a lot of time with design and engineering trying to build world-class products. But there's also a lot of flexibility for retailers to plug in, and all businesses to plug in their own solutions and to build on top of it to craft the perfect commerce story for themselves. And so, I'd say today, think banking and financial services and loyalty and marketing and all those verticals I mentioned and across all the channels, right? Online and selling and social and what have you. So really a comprehensive suite for sellers of all shapes and sizes.
Can you take us behind, when you talk about design and how you get to these solutions, we're sort of interested in the innovation process. What does that look like? How do you go about deciding what to focus on and actually bring those products to market? Yeah,
great question. So what we use at Square is something that we borrowed from Clayton Christensen in his Innovator's Dilemma. It's called the Jobs to be Done framework. Yeah. And what's really powerful about this, the way I try to summarize it is, people didn't ask Henry Ford for a car, they asked for a faster horse. And what it is kind of looking at what is the job they're trying to accomplish. It's not about, riding a four-legged animal. It's about moving quickly from one place to the next. And so if you look at what that need is, and then from that moment you think about all the possible solutions, you ultimately get to a place where you can innovate and you can actually deliver something superior. So using that framework at Square, a lot of it starts with research. I'd say first and foremost, we spend a lot of time with sellers. We're in the stores with them. We have UX researchers that spend a lot of time going deep and talking to a lot of sellers of a given type. It's important to actually focus and get narrow. So recently, for example, we spent a bunch of time talking to specialty grocers because we wanted to get a little bit deeper on what are the trends and what's going on there. And then once the research comes back, we have product managers and designers that try to distill that research and think about, okay, based on what we're hearing and seeing, how do our current capabilities map? What more do we need to do? What are the sort of adjacent things that could really bring the story to life and make things easier? And by the way, make things easier is kind of what we're all about. If you look at a lot of our solutions, there's a lot of complexity, especially in retail. There's a lot of things that I consider like the medicine, right? Like counting your inventory and putting in your vendor costs and, figuring out your margins. What we find the way to kind of, educate and get folks to do the right thing and kind of, take the medicine is to show them the reports and show them the richness of the forecast and the analysis that come out of that. And so that's a big part of what we're trying to do is craft, the minimal set of interactions that you need to do these hard things, right? But at the same time, make sure to immediately show sellers the value that they're getting, whether it's like, the data and the insights derived from the data to kind of make it worth their time. And then, on into traditional software engineering. A lot of what we're doing is shipping on iPads, but also on our own hardware. And so, just making sure that we're kind of taking advantage of the latest that the platforms will allow us. But really, this is kind of the promise of what a seller imagines when they sign up with Square is that we're always going to be innovating. We're always going to be releasing new versions, taking advantage of the new form factors and new capabilities. And so that's just kind of...
in some ways, that's what they're signing up for, right?
That's exactly
They're buying
right.
into you're going to deliver them innovation, and you've got a pipeline. And you would say that that's kind of one of the differentiators between you and making other choices, right? Is that what...
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you compare it to something legacy where once you buy it, you kind of maybe sign up for support of the thing you bought.
Right.
But with Square, what you're kind of signing up for is a steady stream of updates and kind of, and honestly, just a lot of listening to what sellers want and kind of making sure we can come back and bring them the functionality.
Right. We're here at the big NRF show in New York City, so let's talk about the industry writ large, so to speak. If you think about retail, there's been a lot of, over the years, a blurring of all the channels and a blurring of transactions. And, when we think of that, we're post or semi-post, quasi-post pandemic accelerated. Certainly touchless and a lot of the innovation in the payments happened and it was accelerated. How do you perceive that? How do you look at that? And when you look at your own product, how do you reflect it back on what you're seeing in the larger trends in the industry?
Totally, yeah. So pandemic itself was kind of a landmark moment because it forced a lot of disruption and it accelerated a lot of things, right? So obviously the move to online happened in a matter of 3 weeks instead of the 3+ months it might take an offline retailer. But I think what it really spoke to was the agility and the resilience of businesses. We saw that in spades. And what's interesting is that from a Square standpoint, we hit pause. We looked at all the things that we had in the plan. And then one of the things that I always find really interesting is we didn't end up changing too much of what we were planning to do. We maybe changed the sequence of it. And the reason for that is a lot of the things that we're doing remain important, maybe in a different order, right? So we moved more quickly to things like buy online, pick up in store, curbside pickup, and to enable sellers. But a lot of where we were moving anyway was omnichannel, right? And just kind of enabling a richer blending of those experiences. And so I would say that that's a lot of what we learned during pandemic. Coming out of pandemic and looking at some of the trends, obviously we're looking to more of a bias towards in-store now. I think both on the consumer side and the seller side. So sellers were hitting up to about 50% last year. So during the course of 2022, it came down from 49% of revenue was online to something like 44% that we found. Consumers, likewise, it's seeing less of a wallet shift because they're shopping in person. But omnichannel remains super important. Some of the things we hear lately from consumers are, 24% of them won't even shop with a retailer if they don't have a website. 17% of them will abandon a cart if there's no buy now, pay later. And, a lot of this data really speaks to there's just a baseline expectation of technology flowing seamlessly across channels. Consumers, expect and want that stuff. So, a couple of the recent trends that I think would be, worth highlighting here would be pricing. Given what's going on a macro stage, a lot of sellers are looking to increase their prices. And so, what's important here is for sellers to make sure they telegraph that openly. what we see is a lot of support from consumers. I think a lot of our Gen Z demographics are actually going to be really supportive of sellers looking to increase prices. They know what's going on in the world, but I would say telegraphing a lot of those changes is important. We see payments, and especially flexible payments like buy now, pay later, only increasing in traction. During last year's holiday period, we saw, multiples of usage compared to the year prior, because a lot of consumers are looking to use those tools to manage their overall spend more effectively, and that's going to persist, I believe, into 23.
Are you worried about the sustainability of the buy now, pay later? I mean, as the economy gets tighter and, buy now, pay maybe never kind of problem?
Yeah, it's a...
and if you were running, if your clients or you, as you came from your background, we were running a credit bureau, a credit book of business, you would know you'd start to see some things go up in the wrong direction when the economy gets a bit tougher. Right? How do you perceive that?
Yeah, I think it's there's a lot of folks that will try to compare buy now, pay later to the more traditional credit card industry. And I think if you look at the mechanics of the product, there's a lot of safeguards built in that actually make it less of an issue. I'd say that we're in the high 90s in terms of kind of repayments, and a lot of the mechanics the safeguards are built in so that if there's a missed payment, there's no more digging yourself in a hole, and there's no more penalties upon penalties accruing. And so I think that it's kind of
so structurally, you think it's right for the times.
I think that's right, and I think a lot of people see that and realize it, and it's why it's kind of a preferred approach especially for younger generations as opposed to credit cards.
Got it.
So yesterday, I caught your session. You were talking about the connected consumer, which I think is, there are lots of terms. We get into the buzzword bingo here around, omni-channel, seamless, unified. I like to call it harmonized because, I just like to add to the lexicon, I guess. But one of the things we've talked about a bunch on the podcast is it does seem for some of us that have been in this industry for a long time that a lot of the trends towards this blurring of the lines have actually been present for a very long time, but it's the case that many retailers were slow to respond. So I have two questions for you. One is, do you believe that that's true? And if so, maybe three questions. If so, why do you think that happens? And then how do you see and how do you work with retailers to help them accelerate that journey to that more seamless experience, or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. A lot of the trends were already in place. I think what the industry tends to do is to be a little bit reactionary. And so what you get is, hey, there's not a lot of people or it's not moving fast enough apparently to, an online presence and a social media presence. And so, really the big buzzword is omni-channel, be everywhere, right? Like omni, and kind of do it all at once. And so now I would say that at least my takeaway from connected commerce is it's kind of like pulling back from the extreme and thinking a little bit more deliberately about, okay, certain of these experiences need to be more deliberate. We have to think more carefully about where are people doing discovery, where are people doing the actual comparison shopping, where do we think they're going to make the purchase, where are they going to make the return, and then making sure that you kind of support those, because the truth is you can't do everything really well, right? I mean, there's scarce time and resources from a retailer, from a seller standpoint. So that's what I would say kind of strikes me, is that doing a little bit more of that kind of journey mapping. And
I was going to ask you, is customer journey mapping something that you really lean on to try to figure out where either you're eliminating the friction point or whatever you want to call it, or I like to call it kind of amplifying the wow. There's this opportunity to get rid of something that's friction or a pain point, and there's maybe a chance to do something that really delights the customer, but you have to do it at that more micro level to really understand where to focus.
Yeah, I think that's totally right, and what that ideal mix is going to vary depending on each retailer and what they think that their customers are asking them for. Curbside was a really interesting example of this. I think, we saw that during pandemic, and, contactless measures were really important, but curbside is stuck around in a lot of places, and there's increasing appetite for folks to just skip the line and just have something super convenient. Maybe the kids are in the car. There's a lot of really interesting things that folks discover, and so just being deliberate about what matters to your customers, I think, is super important. But consumers are speaking. Like I said earlier, we've discovered that, for example, again, consumers will not shop with you. 23% of them, if you don't have, some online presence, is a wake-up call, right? It's not just about there's kind of a permission to play, I would say. Right. You kind of have to have presence, especially on the channels where your consumers are, but you don't necessarily have to sell all of your products on Instagram or offer native checkout on each of the platforms that you're on.
Right, yeah, I think you in your commentary yesterday were talking about a bit of the disdain. I don't remember if it was you or one of the panelists talking about a bit of disdain for Omni, and Michael's heard me say this a bunch of times. There's only two problems I have with omni-channel, the omni and the channel part.
That's right.
Because this idea of being everywhere, I think, is just ridiculous, and this channel-centric thinking, I think, gets in the way of taking care of customers that are shopping everywhere they are and going back and forth from digital and physical in a lot of respects.
Yep.
When you look, because you do have this wide view, as Michael talked about earlier, you work with all these different segments, different types of retailers, big and small and everywhere in between. Are there some general observations you have about what retailers do to get it right? Getting it right being, whether that's being customer-centric, whether that's great financial results, great net promoter scores, whatever. But are there some themes that you see with the retailers you work with that are really staying ahead of the pace of disruption?
Yeah, I think you said it right out of the box, which is customer centricity, just being really focused on customers. And it comes in a couple different forms. I think paying attention to the options and offering, like payment flexibility is a really big one. We see that there's just a lot of appetite to, 1 in 4 businesses, wants to offer a buy now, pay later solution, plans to in the coming year. That goes up to 40+% if it's a Gen Z seller. Just this awareness that people want more flexibility, and you don't want to miss a sale because you just can't support what it is that they want, right? So definitely payment flexibility is one. I would say automation is really kind of in its key moment right now because you've got a lot of financial pressure on folks, and so you've got to do more with less. And so, one of the interesting, again, customer-centric nuances of this is we know that, over 1 in 5 customers will prioritize visiting a retailer that's more modern and that has using automation. And so it's actually kind of like consumers want and expect it. 40+% of them want to be able to use automated solutions for looking up inventory and for finding products as opposed to talking to a store associate, right? And then I know that things like self-checkout sometimes get a bad rap and like they're very difficult and people, the whole theft issues and whatnot. But I think we're at this moment where consumers want automation. Ideally, if it works really well and is kind of seamless and problem-free. Retailers could really benefit from it, not only from their own, labor cost management standpoint, but also automation to empower the staff that they do have to do their jobs more effectively. So surfacing the full sheet of that customer that you're talking to. What have they bought? What are their preferences? What more might you upsell them on? Mm-hmm. So there's just a lot of value, I think, in automation. I think a lot of retailers that are embracing that are getting it right. And then, we talked already about omni-channel. I'd say, right now we know that retailers, on average, are in at least 4 different channels for selling, and the majority of them, 80+%, want to be in more. And so here it's, again, going back to getting the balance right, understanding how to prioritize your time. Where should you just focus on having a presence, and then where should you do kind of a lot more investment to actually do the selling? I think these are the key themes that I'm finding.
So it's January 2023. Again, we're here at the NRF show. What's your outlook for 2023? I mean, there's both lots of positive things happening, lots of momentum in the industry. We're kind of, really you can see it. You can see it as you walk the floor of this show, listening to you. Lots of positive momentum. How's your outlook for 2023? What's the focus? What are you thinking?
Look, I'm really positive. I know that there's a lot of macro things, and we never really know what the next curveball is. But like I said, coming out of pandemic, we know that there's a lot of capability to roll with things and to be agile. And so, really, the key technique for 23 is stay on top of what's happening. Use data. Use intelligent systems that can tell you what products are selling well. That might be different next month than it is from today or from years prior. Which customers seem to be coming back more, right? Like, think about how your loyalty and your marketing should evolve. What are your staffing trends? What happened during your last holiday sale? How many more people do you have to hire? How can you, increase your store hours to maximize foot traffic? Just paying attention to the data, being agile and responsive to that, leaning on a system that allows you to capture and give you the intelligent reports is going to be pretty key. And then, look, there's a ton of technology out here. There's a lot of things I see.
I was going to say, for the audience who haven't been here, we're sitting amidst 1,000 booths. I don't even know. Just an enormous amount of
there are
different
dancing. I think I saw a guy in a robot suit, and there are some fantastic things out here. So there's a lot of technology out there that I've been seeing for years, and a lot of things are starting to come into a little bit more of the limelight. RFID has been here for years, but we're starting to see that start to show up a little bit in checkout.
I did that yesterday at where was it? Uniqlo. I did their RFID checkout.
It's like magic. You drop all your stuff in, and it just makes the cart.
RFID's been kind of the next technology for 10 years.
Exactly right.
Maybe this will be the year. So,
hey, if QR codes can have their moment, I think RFID, it's their time to shine.
I didn't think those ugly little things would last. So taking all this into consideration, how you're seeing the industry, what's next for you guys? What's next for Square? What's in that big roadmap of yours?
Aside from the buzzy technology, what I like to focus a lot on is what are the underlying trends that are likely to persist a little bit longer. One of the things that's been getting a lot of attention is artificial intelligence and machine learning and some of the ways that that's going to transform things. This is a thing we've been leaning on actually for a few years now. So we have built into our product some tools that can really simplify the tedium of like item entry. We have automatic item creation where we can figure out based on what you're typing what you're likely to want and then turn that into select. Is this what you meant? And then we can autofill the rest of it for you. So that, from telling you when it's time to reorder based on velocity, telling you, all of this, that as a trend, I think, is kind of low-hanging fruit, freeing people up from repetitive, tedious tasks and just letting the computer do what it's good at, freeing people up to do what they're good at, connecting with their customers and like thinking more deeply about, what they should be carrying. So that's an important trend that's worth calling out. I think conversational commerce goes unnoticed. To me, and I think I mentioned this also on stage yesterday, anywhere there's communication, there can be commerce. And if you look at what the trends are, like I don't like taking phone calls. I prefer to text, and I think a lot of folks are with me on that. And so what happens then is, wouldn't it be great to just make that interaction possible between a buyer and a seller, not only for making a purchase, but for checking on an order, for changing the time of your haircut, for canceling something that you didn't want. All of that stuff is Square in our crosshairs right now, pun intended, where we have Square messages, where there's millions of messages already flowing between buyers and sellers today. We only plan to continue there because it's a very powerful way to not require as resource-intensive a thing as like a phone call, and you don't have to be in the store. A lot of that can be automated, that communication. So I think that's a really important trend.
Well, I love the fact we were talking off mic that you have an office in Toronto, so one of those conversational things, they can never get the Canadian accent right, so I'm thrilled. I think if anybody can nail it, you guys can nail it, so looking forward to that.
Well, there's so many interesting things. I do, as we go to close, I do want to go back to that customer's jobs to be done framework, because I think, in the context of Square in particular, it's maybe easy for me to think of you guys as you're sort of just, not that it's not a big thing, just in the payment space, right? But you're really enabling commerce on a broader scale, because what the customer wants, because they don't care probably too much about payments in particular, right? They want to make sure that they can pay, they can get done what they want to get done, get in and out of the store quickly,
flexibility,
without flexibility of payment. It's that broader perspective, and so I really appreciate you bringing that up, as well as just giving us your perspectives on a whole bunch of other things. So thanks, Roshan, for joining us, and hope you have a great rest of the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
If you like what you heard, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, your favorite podcast platform, so you can catch up with all our great interviews, including Organized for Growth, our interview with Satish Mahatra, CEO of The Container Store. New episodes of Season 6 presented for another season by our friends at Marketal will show up each and every Tuesday. And be sure and tell all your friends and colleagues in the retail industry all about us.
And I'm Steve Dennis, author of the best-selling book, Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption. You can learn more about me, my consulting, and keynote speaking at StephenPDennis.com.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer retail growth consultant, keynote speaker and producer, and host of a series of retail trade podcasts, including this one. You can learn even more about me on LinkedIn, and you can catch up with Steve and I in person at Shop Talk in Vegas, March 26th, and a month later in Barcelona at the World Retail Congress, April 25th. Until then, safe travels, everyone.